Hello guys and welcome back to HJW Gaming. In this video I'm going to be continuing my commander guides, particularly for the dwarves, and looking at the tier 1 commander Ori. Now, a little bit of a spoiler for the end for you guys, but for most of you who have played this game before, you already know which way this is going to go. Ori is potentially a contender for one of the worst commanders in the game, which you'll see by the stats kind of in front of you. He definitely is not viable, so I wouldn't recommend running this build unless you have no other option. Even in your first season, you likely will have other commanders you can choose from, and I definitely recommend choosing anyone else basically over Ori. But if you are insistent on running Ori, I just wanted to give a guide on how I would recommend best running him. First up, we'll talk through his stats, and I will also refer to the skills as I go through with this as well before I do a full skill breakdown, as it is very relevant to his stats. Now first up, you'll see his damage. His damage stat is particularly low, 9 to 10, which basically rules out any chance of running him as a damage dealing commander. You'll look at, say, Gimli, for example, whose base is almost double, and you might say, oh, but he's only a tier 1. Even if you ascend, it only goes up to base 11, 12, so he's never going to be a viable damage commander, unfortunately, which basically rules out one of his skills right off the bat. With him being a dwarven commander and having Durin's Blood, one of the best damage skills in the game, it almost is completely, well, it's basically completely unsynergistic with Ori, so he is unrunnable with that skill, which basically writes off a damage build. So then we're going to have to look into his other stats. His command also is very, very average at 34, which means he's unlikely to be used as a tank as well, as he's not going to be able to soak up much of the damage. Similarly, he also has very poor attack, so again, not going to be viable as a damage commander. And he has mediocre defense, which is unfortunate, as actually one of his skills also is modified by the defense stat. So his poor defense, 4.2 per level, if we compare that with Falgin, who goes up by 0.63 per level, he's definitely far behind them as well. He does, however, have pretty good focus at 0.61 per level, which is not too bad, though again, it's just miles off other focus commanders, such as Gandalf the White, for example. He basically just doesn't really have any stats that really, truly shine. Even his initiative is very low at 0.27. It's higher than some of the other dwarves, but not by much. His stats basically are kind of lackluster all the way through, even when you look towards Ascension. Most of his stats don't get a lot better. He still has fairly low base HP, and everything else doesn't really improve. His command goes up to 54, which is slightly better, but not massive. Overall, he just kind of has pretty poor stats. Before we talk through gear, I am going to talk through the rest of those skills. So we've basically already discussed Durin's Blood and why I'm writing that one off. Whilst it does deal, as a skill itself, a massive amount of burst damage every 3 rounds, it is going to be held back and limited massively by the lack of attack and damage on Ori, so it's definitely not worth running this skill, as he's not really going to deal enough damage with it. So we'll start with his top respec 0, which is the Clark skill. Now this increases the focus of Ori himself, and also one allied commander by 2, and when maximised that is actually a 20 buff. At 5 skill points he gains 5 initiative, and at 10 skill points he gains unit attack of +3 and commander attack of +3. Now his commander attack is so low, we're not going to be using him for damage, so that's almost completely useless, and unit attack of +3 is so mediocre and minor that it's almost not worth talking about again. When you compare it to commanders, like Elrond or the upcoming Azog, that could increase by 30 to 33 attack, a +3 is almost insulting. Again, initiative +5 is completely useless, as his initiative stat is so low that it's almost pointless again. So the only reason we would run this skill is looking at the focus buff. However, only one of his skills actually increases with focus. So the only reason we would do this is to synergize with that skill. However, the focus to one allied commander of +20 might be of interest. Of course, you can't choose which commander this goes to. It's completely random. So you have to make sure you're using Ori in a focus-built full army, so the other commanders focus as well, so that this buff could then be applied to them and be useful, which we'll kind of talk about later. His bottom respec 0 is Musician, which again is seen on a couple of other dwarves, primarily on Dwalin. When this is fully increased, every third round you get a burst heal of 420%, and this is modified by the focus stat, so that could be boosted a little by the Clark stat above. It also provides 1 debuff purification, which can be useful for purifying say the Deceiver from Sauron, for example, but as it doesn't purify from the rest of your allies, again, it's not massively useful. If this skill also purified ally debuffs, it might be a little bit more useful, but unfortunately it doesn't, and it does provide plus 10 unit defense, which again is very, very small. We see massive defense buffs in some of the other commanders. Again, Azog at the minute appears to have something similar. 10 defense just isn't enough to make him viable, unfortunately. And his respec 5 is Dwarf Warrior, which increases defense again, this time of dwarf units in the commander's formation by plus 4, which gradually decreases over 6 rounds. This is 40 when it is maximized, and this effect is modified by the defense stat. At level 10, you gain 10% bonus HP. So you'll see from all these stats, none of them are really particularly synergistic. You've got one that increases with focus, one that increases with defense, one that's damage-based. There's almost no synergy at all here between Ori's skills, essentially. You might be able to get him output a little bit of damage if you put top-tier damage gear, and I mean top-tier damage gear on him, and run Durin's Blood. But I just don't see why you would do that when you could just run someone like Dwalin and get, significantly better results, as he has Durin's Blood. He also has Experienced Warrior in his top respec 0 skill tree. So there's no reason to run Ori over Dwalin. However, if you're going to run him in his focus, in a focus support build, what I would do was first maximize Musician, which gives you the healing through, gives you the heal as well, and gives you the debuff purification. Now, this, of course, healing at the current builds or current state of the game is not particularly viable, which is another reason why Ori will not really be usable. But once I'd maximised Musician, I would then put points into Clark, and I would then, of course, run him with other focus commanders to get the bonus of that extra focus. Now, 20 is not very much. That's like kind of a couple of strengthens of gear. It's not going to make a massive difference. You might get a couple of percentage extra damage reduction from White Council, for example, if this hit a Gandalf commander running that skill. But that's what you have to hope to do. Maybe build him with Gandalf the White or Gandalf the Grey, along with another damage dealers like Sistaro or Scalhelm, potentially. This would probably be the route I would go down, is run a mix of Musician and Clark, and then any remaining points into Dwarf Warrior. Now, as for best equipment, we want to look to put focus and defense on him. So we are going to take a look, actually, not into my own gear, as I won't have this available. I'm going to instead look into the Matham chest. For flawless weaponry, I personally would recommend with this build running the Noldor Sword. Reason for this being that it increases your focus, so will help with that healing with Musician, and also provide some unit defense and command to make Ori slightly more tanky. Again, though, any kind of focus-based gear could be just as effective. Similarly, a Morgul Blade would be useful. This, again, gives high amounts of focus. It does give commander defense as well, which would boost that respec 5 skill, and actually gives a little bit of initiative as well to help boost his initiative, essentially. There are plenty of other options which also increase focus and commander defense. Dawn, again, it can also be useful. Increases that focus, increases that commander defense, and also improves his unit support with an amount of command and attack and defense buffs. Again, I don't think it's particularly viable anyway, so any of these, it's probably a waste of flawless gear, to be honest. But if you're insistent on using him, one of these could be effective. For flawless armour, I would look towards the Great Plate of the East. We're not going to get any kind of command or anything out of this, so we're just, again, going to look towards that focus and defense, and the Great Plate of the East is probably the best for this. If you're looking for just pure focus, with a little bit less defense. Protection of Numenor, again, is a very strong option. Though if you have this available, I would probably run it on someone like one of your Gandalfs to get the best White Council possible from them, as they'll benefit more from this than Ori will. But the Protection of Numenor could be another option as well. And lastly, Plate of the Citadel, again, another option. Focus, defense, and actually unit defense as well, so you can make Ori's units a little bit more tanky. As for helms, we'll scroll down to the bottom. Again, looking at focus and commander defense, your choices are the Grey Wizard Hat for maximum focus, or the Swan Helm, which does offer a little bit of bonus unit defense, again, to make your units more tanky at the cost of some focus, and it does also have slightly better commander defense for that Respect 5 skill. Accessory-wise, again, a couple of different options. Commander defense and focus, again, can be gained from the Fine Smoking Pipe. Benefit being you can actually get damage refines from this through your season pass every season. So you may be able to get more refines in this than you can in other items. And the Signet of the Barrows also offers bonus initiative, though slightly less focus, but higher commander defense than that of the Fine Smoking Pipe. As for exquisite rarity, you're probably going to want to look towards the Warhammer, as this offers maximum focus and commander defense combined. So this will likely be the best item for him. Hunter's Skin could be a good choice for chest, as it offers, again, maximum amount of focus for that musician heal skill, and a little bit amount of unit defense for more tankiness. As for accessory, the Wizard's Fireworks can be useful for a little bit of focus. Similarly, the Hobbit Fiddle is probably a good choice. Unit defense, commander defense, and focus once again, along with command. Or the Harp of Lothlorien for higher amounts of focus, but some unit attack buffs. Helms, again, you can also look towards the Bone Mask, maximum focus obtainable, and also some defense as well. So if you're looking for purples, those would be the ones I would choose. Now, looking into Ori's Relic. His Relic is the Axe of the Clerk. If we look into this, it buffs various different stats. Surprisingly, it doesn't buff his focus at all, which is surprising again, considering he has a skill that scales with focus. But hey, I don't make the decisions here. So it gives him commander attack, the commander attack being almost completely pointless. Command, of course, make him slightly more tanky. That defense will help with his Respect 5 and unit defense to make his units more tanky. The only kind of half-decent thing is actually the ability on this, which is the Perfect Planning, which when fully refined, from round 4 onwards, dwarf ranged units in the commander's formation have a 100% chance to deal maximum damage each round. Now, the Dwarven Axe Thrower is the reason why this is interesting, as the Dwarven Axe Thrower has a wide range of damage, but the maximum damage is actually pretty high. So with this, you could therefore get them dealing a reasonable amount of damage. However, the only problem is none of Ori's skills really buff damage at all beyond that. So you'd have to use another commander who could increase troops' unit damage, which just is irritating, as you'd hope Ori's skill trees would allow additional unit damage. Other than that +3 unit attack, it's so kind of minor and mediocre, it's almost not worth discussing. But that's kind of, it's a good buff, but doesn't, again, synergize well with his skill trees or his commander stats, unfortunately. Just show you his little outfits in case you're interested. Not that I would ever recommend taking him up to this level of investment. He just changes cloak into a green cloak, so again, not a particularly fantastic Zenith outfit, which again is unfortunate and just discourages you again from trying to put him there. I've spoken about commanders that synergize. I'd obviously recommend some of the focus dealing damage commanders like Skalhelm, like Sestaro, for example, and also something like Gandalf the White or Gandalf the Grey, who can benefit again from that top Respect 0 skill Clark if you're going to pair him with anything. And unit-wise, I'd recommend pairing him with probably with using a bloodline, so using a dwarf. If you've got the Relic, I'd recommend pairing him with Master Axe Throwers, and if not, just sticking him with a Guardian that will benefit from that bonus attack defense and benefit a little bit from the heal. Anyway, as you can tell, this commander is definitely F tier, will always be F tier in the tier list, unfortunately, until he gets some massive changes either to his skills or his stats. And definitely, I do not recommend running. I wouldn't recommend him if you're free to play either. Even if he's in your Season 1, just use somebody else. You'll surely have Eowyn, Faramir, Dwalin, something else available. Use those instead. Anyway, if you have enjoyed just watching through a little bit of a discussion around Ori, please drop the like button and please consider giving me a subscribe, as you can see more of my guides in the future. I will be covering more viable commanders going forwards. Just wanted to kind of tick off the set with the dwarves. Anyway, with that, I've been HJW Gaming, and I really hope to see you in the next one.